you've been running 20 miles per week, but the last 4 weeks your average is only like 13, that's a significant increase, even though if maybe the week before you ran 17. If 3 or 4 weeks ago you were only running 5 or 8 miles, that's a big difference, and it's going to really help you out with that. So those things like training effect and understanding that it's not just week to week, but you have to look a little further in the past and look at some of those apps and some of those softwares. It can really help you out with that. And having a plan, this is an example of like an annual training plan. Like a lot of runners, we coach a couple runners and work with a couple people too. And when we're working with them in the beginning of the year, we'll set up like an annual training plan for them so that they understand when should they be working on different phases and what are their distances and some key workouts. And this can help them to really use this information we're talking about to get the most out of their training with that too. And your strength, I'm a big fan of doing strength training, and I think that all runners really should be doing strength training, and we have to periodize and do our strength training in the same kind of manner too, looking at some of those things as well, and giving our body variety with those. Mike's going to go into some of his experience with training by heart rate and listening to some of these numbers, and this is just like a chart, and this is one of the things on the handout here is, lots of people hear about the heart rate zones, and they say, well, what are those zones? And we've kind of broken them down. What I love about this is like I think heart rate is a great way, and like I said, it really doesn't let you lie to yourself about how good you're feeling that day. But if you do want to start simple, there's ways of just doing rate of perceived exertion on a scale of 1 to 10. How good do I feel today on my run? And maybe give yourself a half-mile warm-up to determine that. But that can still be really beneficial. If you're 5 or higher, that's considered moderate to intense workout. You should be doing almost 80% of your running at a 4 out of 10 effort level or less. And a lot of people, if they're above that, that's where a lot of people wind up seeing somebody like us, where they wind up injured because they're doing too fast, too hard. So that you can base this on heart rate, you can base this on lactate threshold, but there's different zones, and staying in those zones for specific times can be really helpful. So I'll turn it over to Mike with that and let him share his experience and some of his stuff.
I have a question for you, Gary.
Yeah.
A lot of the watches now have the wrist-based heart rate monitor.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain the difference between using a wrist-based heart rate monitor and using a chest strap?
Okay, so a lot of people don't like wearing a chest strap, so that's why every watch now really has wrist-based heart rate. The way wrist-based heart rate works is it sends a light beam through your skin and reads blood flow. A lot of people ask, is it more accurate than a chest strap? And the answer is no. Chest strap is going to be the most accurate. It's actually reading your EKG heart rate. So that's going to be the most accurate. Wrist-based is going to be good. We tell people it'll be within 5 beats 90% of the time. My experience is, well, first, you have to be wearing it properly. If you're not wearing it tight or snug, it's not going to work very well. If it's moving around, if it gets light underneath it, it's not going to be as accurate. The harder you're running, the more chance it's going to move around if you don't have it tight enough. So I tell people it needs to be snug. When you go for a run, it should be 1 to 2 notches tighter. And if you do see that discrepancy where it might be off by as much as 10 beats or that 10% when it's not as right, it's usually when you're running a workout or something fast.
What about the accuracy if you're wearing the watch over sleeves?
Well, it's not going to give wrist space if you have anything underneath it. So it's got to be right on your skin, and it can't be moving. So it needs to be snug. Okay. What I try to tell people is if you're, most people here probably are going to want to wear a chest strap. If you're going to want if you want your heart rate to be dialed in, you're going to wear a chest strap. So I say at least wear a chest strap for workouts, races, hard runs, where you want to make sure it's dialed in and being very accurate. And the wrist-based heart rate is going to work well for everything else. You're also going to get better heart rate variability through the chest strap. You can't get heart rate variability through wrist space when you're moving. So it uses all these other calculations to try to give you as accurate of information without wearing a chest strap. But I usually recommend, if you want to be dialed in, wear that chest strap.
I'll jump into how I started reusing my heart rate about this time last year. So to give you a background, I had a real busy schedule, stuff was going on. So my mileage was about 9 miles a week, like trying to fit in runs when I could. and I had a run with friends, and it was a race, and it was a 20-mile run, and went out for the run, ran as hard as I could, and it just reinvigorated. All right, I'm ready to start running again, and but I had obviously going from 9 miles a week to 20 was an extreme, and then probably the week after I was out for a run with a good friend, and he's at the time he's a 58-year-old marathoner, runs 2:31. He just missed the 50-year-old national record, so he's an outstanding runner. And his daughter is now like a world national class swimmer. And we were talking about his fitness level and how well he's been running. And he said that he started training 6 months prior to our run with heart rate. And he said, I'm using a technique that distance swimmers use so they don't overtrain. And it's called MAF or MAT training. And it is a very, what I'll explain as Doug was explaining the heart rate zones, I'll explain it as a very dumbed down version of heart rate training, which was perfect for me at the time. My goal, the heart rate training is just based on age. In this case, it says you want to lower your heart rate for every run and keep it at that level. And by lowering your heart rate, and we'll see, I had to lower my speed significantly, I was able to gain strength. And then once I got that strength back, I was able to start running back to where I mentioned before, I like to run on the watch based on pace. I was able to get back on pace where I wasn't racing myself. I was able to just run at a comfortable effort and still hit the numbers I was going for. So in my case, 50 years old, the idea is the number is 180 minus your age. Exactly. 180 minus your age. So for me, that puts me at 130. And then you evaluate what's your fitness level at that time. And I felt my fitness level was good, so I gave myself a +5. So from that point on, every run was at a heart rate of 135. Every run. So, so for me, again, this is anecdotal. For me, that heart rate level was at 135, and the idea is every 4 weeks, you're supposed to go to a track, you do a 1 mile or 1.5 mile warm-up, and then you run 1 mile on the track, just set at that heart rate, and there's your pace. So I ran at that level for 2 weeks, and then I went to the track and I ran. Now, to get to that level, if my everyday run was anywhere between 6:55 and 7:05, for those first 2 weeks, really I didn't use pace. I just ran on heart rate. So, but I went to the track, all set for this test, and to hit that 136 heart rate, my mile time was 8:22. And it's you have to have patience if you want to train this way. And I was following the numbers pretty hard. So 122, I was like, all right, put the ego aside. It's going to get stronger. So you're supposed to do it every 4 weeks. I stuck with it. The numbers may not show, but my mileage to start off was, again, I was going from 9 miles. So I was about 18 miles. Average heart rate was about 138, 136. I was going off for Garmin where if I went to 135, it would beep and let me know. But there were times if I was running up Brandywine Creek, running up a hill, my heart rate goes from 136 to 149, like when I make that workload going up the hill, and it's pretty quick. So after that test, I stuck 3 more weeks using that heart rate, same training, about that 130, 135, 136 level. I have an average week listed there, but it was anywhere from 133 to 135, average run, average week. I went back thought I was feeling better. I went back to do the test again. Second week, 802. 802, not 902. So 802. At this point in time, I kept plugging with it. And what I've learned through that course of time was listening to my body was much easier. Okay, what am I going to be able to get out of myself today? If I was on the trails, I was slowing down to 840, 830 pace. If I was on the roads, I was able to get a little bit closer to 745, 750 pace. Go back through, and throughout, it dropped down fairly quick where, if you can't see, it goes at week 2, 822 at that mile test, 802, 744, 718 with a full month in between. And then after test 5, which is about 15 weeks in, I was about 708 pace. So I was back to where I had been trying to run 15 weeks earlier. But with respect to how I felt running that pace, it was much, much better. At this point in time, it was probably March, April, and I had gone from that 20 to maybe 30 miles a week to being able to, okay, I feel strong, I feel fit. Now is when I can start increasing the load and getting the miles. Now, for me, with my schedule, my miles didn't get to more than 50, but those 50, I didn't feel overworked. I felt within range where if I did a run, it didn't hurt me for the next day. Like I do get the Garmin activity or recovery rates, and some days it would say I would need 32 hours to recover, but I really didn't deviate much between that training effect between +4 and -1. Like I never really had put myself in a debt. Like even in some races, I stuck to that heart rate. If it was a race day, I adjusted that 135, 136 to 140. So I gave myself an extra 10 beats. But I stuck pretty true to that, like for what I could. It definitely kept me from getting injured. It definitely it reduced my over fatigue on trying to cram in my runs. There are some runs where I realized just based on heart rate that I would only go out for 2.5, 3 miles. But I did find that maximum threshold training was a good way for me to redevelop my strength. I think are there any cyclists in here or something? Some cyclists, I think, use it. They would use the term as like power, like riding with a certain amount of power. And for those that do read or study training, there are now running devices that try to incorporate power.
All these watches do it.
Yeah. They incorporate power when you run. Before, like the accelerometers that are now on shoe pods or on watches are so good in terms of giving you a 3-dimensional acceleration range where they are able to determine, okay, how much power does that person have with their stride? How much power are they getting with like my watch has a cadence. It tells me how many steps per minute I'm running. If you download that information, I'm pretty close between 170 and 175 steps per minute. Like so based on the amount of turnover and the amount of swing, it determines power. So cyclists and multi-sport triathletes have been using heart rate longer than runners, probably more effectively. They've been using power longer than runners, again, probably more effectively. And these are now kind of tools that you can start to use. So whether you're in the yellow zone, red zone, green zone, whatever you're training, for those 6 months, 8 months, I just tried to keep it at one zone. And I was able to certainly gain a lot of strength for my runs.
So that was all volume miles, Mike, for the most part?
Yeah, that was. There were no workouts. There were no workouts. There were runs like Zach. There were runs where I said, today I just want to kind of run hard, and I would try to get as close to 136 as quick as I could, and try to push that. And if I did deviate from it, I didn't deviate more than five beats for the last mile of the run. So they again, my goal at the time was just to get in the run when I could and get my strength up.
I think something that a lot of people kind of go through your mind is how you're going to get faster doing this. I mean, you can see right there that it does get faster, but another thing is that if you're getting to the point where you can follow the 80-20 and you're not just doing this type of aerobic threshold type of, or not threshold, but under your aerobic threshold type of running, is that if you're doing the 80-20, that 20% can be that much faster. You have that much more recovery, that much more strength. So that's where you get faster too. Not only are you running your average easy runs at a, much faster at the same heart rate, but your other runs are going to be a lot more effective.
And to just go over how the Garmin's could also benefit. You get better by recovery. So most of the watches, or at least the watches we're talking about, will give you that training effect we're talking about. So you finish an activity, you're going to get a number, depending on which watch is, between 0 and 5 or 1 and 5. 5 means you're overextending yourself. A low number means you're not doing a whole lot. So you do a workout, you do a race, you do a hard long run, you're going to expect to see a number of 4 to 5. If you do a recovery run or an easy run and you're still in that range of 4 or 4 to 5, you're running too hard. My experience is most people don't know what an easy day is. And a lot of people I train, every day they run is 4 or higher. And when I tell them, okay, I need your heart rate to be at this number, kind of like what Mike was doing, you see the training effect come down. And then when they do that multiple days, a month or two later, like what he was doing, the pace starts coming down, the heart rate comes down too. They can run at a higher heart rate and get a lower training effect because they're in better shape. So the training effect is going to help you a lot with that information.
With the Garmin, then I have a 935 by FK.
Yeah. So yours is doing everything we're talking about.
Okay, but you're talking about running in a specific. Does this thing, if I used it right, which I don't, it will beat when I'm above or below my target?
You have to set that.
Yeah, you can set it, but yes, I do set it.
You can set the a ceiling or a floor alert. And also one of the things to be aware of, a lot of people train up heart rate, but if you don't know what your heart rate zones are, it's probably not very helpful. I always tell people, if you're going to train up heart rate, at least either get one of our nice watches that you can do a lactate threshold test, or go get a test done. Otherwise, I know people who are in their 50s who have maximum heart rates over 200, and I know people in their 30s who have maximum heart rates in the 170s. So you can't just say 220 minus your age, and that's your maximum heart rate. If you do, you're going to either train too hard or too easy. But if you have one of our higher end watches, you would have to wear a chest strap. We have a lactate threshold test. It'll give you a lactate threshold, so now you know what your tempo is supposed to be at. But you can also say, give me my zones based off of that, and then your zones are going to be very accurate. So then at least you know that if I'm supposed to be in zone 3, zone 4, whatever, you know you're going to be in the proper zone and not hoping that your numbers are correct.
John, may I ask, do you download your information from your watch onto Garmin Connect?
Yeah, there's a Garmin app.
Okay,
On my iPhone.
Because really, that's when I say, that's when you can begin to unpeel the onion. What you're seeing on the watch is a fragment of the information that you can get from it. But once you download it, you can go back and see so much more and see where you are in those heart rates. And so, heart rate zones, excuse me. So, again, utilize the information that where it values you the best.
And we were talking about power before. So if you have the 935 or Phoenix 5, you can either wear the special chest strap or a Running Dynamics pod. And you can download our free app for power, and you will get running power. I still don't know exactly how you use it, but it's cool to look at. It's not the same as cycling. I mean, you're cycling, okay, if I have it in this gear and I'm pedaling at a certain cadence, a certain gear, my power's going to be right here. But when you're running, it's very difficult to look down and say, okay, I need to pick it up a little bit, slow it down a little bit. It's very hard to do, but it is pretty cool afterwards to look at.
I think with the power, one of the big things to remember is look at averages for a duration, not looking at instantaneous. Because
Yeah.
even with cycling power, like if you just look at any single stroke, there's a lot of variability in the power that you'll see with running. So if you look at, you'll drive yourself crazy. It's like the number will be jumping up and down by large percentages, but you want to look at a average of a lot of those things so that you understand, hey, if you were doing a track workout, and I think like I personally don't use power a lot, but we looked into it a little bit for some of this stuff too. And Jim, you use power a lot. I think for doing things like track workouts where maybe you're not worried about your heart rate as much because you're just going hard that day. Power is a great way to really see how hard you're working and track some of those things out. That's the way I might plan to use it a little bit in the future. I know you use it for most of your runs, right?
I do average.
Right.
Because you can't look at the.
You can't look at the instant.
I mean, even if you set up, there's like 5, 10 second increments, it'll still bounce around. So
It's
you just do average.
Yeah, look at your lap. So if your laps are auto lap at a mile or a half mile, whatever you have it set at, you can just look at the averages for that. You don't need to do. Yeah, it's so you have to look at a lot of the.
It is interesting to look at though. Like, if you look at a workout and you say, okay, all my intervals when I was running at 6-minute pace, my power is 380, and when I sped up, it went higher when I slowed down. So you can usually see a little bit of a pattern, but I find for running it's difficult to actually use live. Do you use it while you're running, and do you?
I use it just like I would use heart rate.
Yeah.
So, yeah, because either I've gotten to the point where I'll just do average heart rate, because if, like you say, if you look and you go up a hill, some people's heart rate jumps up, or you actually get a lag. So you start to actually press up a hill too fast, and then all of a sudden your heart rate jumps up too high, and you have to slow way down to get to come back down.
Yep.
So power is the same way. You can jump your power way up, and you have to slow it down. So it's almost like using heart rate. I actually found that, and this was through study, that it actually power is more equal to lactate threshold zones when it comes to heart rate. So I can look at my zones set up for my power, and they almost match identically to my lactate threshold heart rate zones. So I know if I could go home and I'm supposed to say run 235 watts, and I run close to 235 watts, and I was supposed to be below 152 heart rate, they usually pretty much are almost dead in sync. And you can actually line the two up, and they'll, on the chart, flow almost identically together.
See, and it's interesting, because the power doesn't even use the heart rate to determine the power, but I like the idea of finding one number that you're kind of using and understanding when that one number is beneficial and how much weight to put on that one number to say, hey, yeah, if I'm running uphill, like Mike, when you were doing yours, would you, like if you went up a hill, would you like walk sometimes to keep it low enough, or would you?
No, again, like
you let it go up a little bit.
I'd let it go up
as long as it wasn't.
If I knew you or Eric were running behind me on the trails, I'd make sure I kept it up. I did find, again, like I know my heart will jump up almost 10% if I'm going up at a certain elevation. Again, I run often at Brandywine Creek. So I'll see that jump up, but I'll see it level at like 149, 151, no matter how long or if the hill gets steeper.
Yeah.
So I would slow down a little until I just got antsy or ego kind of came in on, all right, let's just get through this.
Let's get this
So
out.
Doug, I think maybe, you're talking about how you started out using your baseline fitness too. Like, I'm currently coming back from like a long story of some health issues where, I think in college and after that, I just always ran by like, what time do we have to run today? Like, we have to run 90 minutes. Everything was just hard. So getting into heart rate training for me is like a whole lot harder than that. I actually will set an alarm, and I want to throw this watch in the river sometimes.
Not because it's a bad watch, though.
No,
because it keeps it's doing its job too well.
It's way too expensive to do that.
Yeah.
But no, it's doing its job, and I have to walk. I can only run so slow because I run a long time, so I have a pretty efficient pace, but it's not a good pace for me right now. So yeah, I can't run up a hill.
And you know what?
At all.
Like any training plan requires patience. Like patience training with a heart rate, but any training plan says like, I need to incorporate a base. I need to build this up for me ultimately to get that end result. So really, that's like, I don't care what you're trying to do, what your goal is, 5K, half marathon, 50 miler, 100 miler, like any training plan has to have patience. Patience with the goal in mind and with some checkups along the way. So I think, and probably everybody in this room has followed some type of training plan along the way. And you have to just remind yourself, okay, be patient with it because my end goal is that half marathon. Be patient with it because I want to break 25 minutes in the 5K. So the true test of an athlete is knowing where they are at the moment and then knowing that they can get where they want to be.
Yeah, and it's also going back to that consistency. If I don't do that, I will be injured again or I'll be sick again, and then I'm not going to build to where I would like to be. So I'm kind of an extreme example. I'm like rebuilding myself as a runner. I've run for years. I ran in college, you know, and I have the tools now to do it right. And fortunately, I was kind of forced to do it. So I could just go back to running 8-minute pace and, you know, trying to build up my mileage like that and not paying attention, but I know I'll just end up in the same spot. So I have big goals, and I'm going to be patient now, and that way for years to come I can meet those goals. Yeah.
So we've talked for about an hour.
Right.
Like, are there any questions or is there any type of discussion? Yeah, Danielle,
I have a
please.
question. How important is hydration when it affects your heart rate? Because I hear like a bunch of people in the